Hello and welcome back to The Movies Made Us Do It. Me and Matt are back. How are you, Matt?
Hi, I'm pretty good, sir. How are you?
I am very well. I'm excited to talk about this movie, which it was a bit of a whim of ours, wasn't it, last week? It wasn't really planned. Yeah. And then I think in the last few minutes of the show, we brought up them. Yeah, and then when we were picking the movie, it was like, let's just do them. Like, okay. Fantastic choice. I love this movie. I've always seen it because in 1954, obviously, Godzilla came out in Japan. Commentary on the atomic bomb, and then the same year in the West we had them, and they kind of feel like they're both trying to sort of say the same thing in a way. Obviously Godzilla's a lot more bleak because they were the victims of, I was going to say the attack.
Godzilla is way darker.
Oh my god, Godzilla
this has its moments.
Yeah, this has its moments, and it certainly has the message at the end and stuff. I mean, obviously Godzilla is a horror movie. It's bleak, and we've done Godzilla in depth. Check that episode out. That was a good one. Not that we have bad ones, but that was one where I was like, sometimes we get to the end of these and I'm like, yes, we have done that film. And Godzilla was one of those where I was like, I feel like we've done that movie. We did it. So, them same year over here, interesting seeing the different perspectives. And like you said, obviously, Godzilla's way more dark and bleak than this is, understandably so. Yeah. But when did you first see them?
Well, I think it must have been a Sunday afternoon showing when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
Really little. And then I don't think I've seen it since I was a teenager. Because I mean, I've got pretty good memory of it. But there was, watching it back the other day, it was like, wow, I'd forgotten a lot of this stuff. I'd certainly forgotten how good James Whitmore is.
He's amazing.
Oh, if I ever noticed. And this Edmund Gwen is the prof is the doctor is just amazing.
That's one of my favorite parts is when she's getting off the plane and all the guys are like, a woman. So everyone's so pervy.
Her skirt got hitched up.
Yeah.
What a shame.
But yeah, he is fantastic, James Whitmore, in this. He's like this like local sergeant that somehow ends up in charge of the world or something.
Yeah.
They just let him go everywhere, and it's like, what is your jurisdiction?
Even and the FBI agent.
Yep.
Suddenly him and the FBI agent, they're like
just wearing
fatigues and they're running around with the army.
Yeah. It's like, I guess I'm ordering this colonel around. Even he comments on it at one point.
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you doing that? That's
the colonel's loading a rocket launcher for him. It's like, why? This doesn't make sense at all.
But he is excellent. They're all great in the role.
Yeah, they are.
So this movie, actually, I hadn't really considered it. When we talked about it, I was like, oh, them, awesome movie.
Yeah.
Love that movie. I own it on DVD. Haven't watched it for years, but awesome. And I know it like off by heart. And then I started watching it. I was like, I was getting like weirdly emotional watching it, because this movie was like the movie I always used to watch at my granddad's house, my nan and granddad's house.
Right.
This was like our movie. It was like my favorite movie that they had on VHS. We used to watch it all the time. And I don't think I've watched it since my granddad passed, years and years ago now. But like rewatching it, I was like, oh my God, all those memories kind of flood back of you like watching it as a kid. And, yeah, it's weird because I've owned it on DVD for years, but I don't think I've actually watched it again for a long, long time, maybe since he passed. So yeah, I've got a real connection to this movie, and rewatching it was a joy. It's such a good movie for a B movie. Like,
well, it's strictly speaking, I suppose it's not really a B movie.
It's got a budget. I mean, I think this is the first of its kind, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's the first giant bug movie.
And much like Godzilla, a lot of what follows then is diminishing returns, and you get like
you can certainly see the difference. I mean, even
this has a budget clearly.
Even within a couple of years, the acting gets worse, the credulity gets worse, but I still love those old. Even the really bad ones, there's a lot of fun to be had in them.
Oh, I love B movies anyway.
It's genuinely, it's well shot.
It's really well shot.
Really well acted. The dialogue, for the most part, is actually pretty good.
Strong female character.
She is.
In 54. She's like, hey, I'm fucking going down this fucking ant nest. Like, deal with it, buddy.
The typical argument, but you believe her, and she she's got.
She's not a damsel in distress, really, for the most part.
No, there's only one bit when the ants first turn up.
Well, the thing is, she screams, but it's like, yeah, you would, and later
exactly.
on,
it's like, well, it's a giant fucking ant. What do you expect?
and later on, the FBI agent in a very similar situation does exactly the same. He screams, and he's like, Jesus Christ, he's being attacked by a giant ant. But let's get into it, and right off the bat, it's one of these weird movies. Is in black and white, but we get the them title in color.
It was supposed to be in color.
Yeah,
it was supposed to be 3D and in color, and basically at the last minute they went panicked, cut the budget, and went no.
I think this film looks a lot better for being in black and white.
I'm glad it's in black and white.
I think this movie would not look as good as it does if it was in color.
I think that's one of the greatest things about a lot of the really good monster movies that are in black and white is that.
And Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Old Doctor Who looks so much better for being in black and white. When they went to colour, it suddenly became very obvious how cheap it was.
The monsters just look so much worse when they're colour.
Yeah. But yeah, so we get the blue and red of the logo, and then we sort of start to see the desert, don't we? And we see the aircraft flying over. And a pilot or police pilot calls down to a car to report that this girl's been seen wandering the desert. And he finds it, and he says, "Oh, I'll just circle around until you guys get there." And
well, they talk about a lot of drunks in this movie. There's a lot of sort of mentions of drunk people and
mental
they
people.
go to a drunk ward.
Yep.
Because he says something when they're flying along. He's like they can't find the girl. And I think the pilot says something along the lines of, "Oh, what that guy in like something about him drinking for his breakfast or something."
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So we're introduced to Ben Peterson, Sergeant Ben Peterson, played by James Whitmore, and his partner, and they meet this girl who, by the way, as someone who is a big fan of both B movies and horror and science fiction of the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, this girl is bloody good.
She's barely in it, but she's amazing, isn't she?
But I mean, like, Son of Frankenstein, one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah. The kid in that is unwatchably bad. He is appalling. Kid actors nowadays are actually trained. I don't think they were particularly trained back in the day. And this girl, she has a small part, but she's convincing as a girl really in shock, and
she's really good. I don't think she was in for very much other than this as well.
She did a couple of kid roles, I think, and then she disappeared. I guess she just quit acting, and I think a lot of kids don't necessarily continue their careers, do they, past being kids? But yeah, I think she's fantastic in this. So this girl is wandering the desert, and obviously they pull up. She's in like a bathrobe, and she's carrying this doll, a doll with its part of its head missing.
Yeah, it's broken doll.
And she's clearly in shock. They try and talk to her, don't they? But she's just mute and not saying anything. Just has that look on her face. So
I thought there was like random things you notice in this movie. Their uniform is really odd.
It is, isn't it?
About the makeup of it and the fact that it's got a little bow tie. I don't think I've ever seen a police uniform with a bow tie before.
It's one of those things where you watch it and you're like, well, maybe that is a uniform somewhere and I'm just not aware of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does seem odd. I mean, whether that was like a very period-specific uniform in a specific state, and they never wore it.
Thing, I don't know.
It's weird, isn't it? But anyway, they get a call from the pilot who says that he spotted a trailer about 3 miles down the road, and they're like, well, the girl, she can't have walked that far. Presumably, that's where she came from this trailer. So Ben and his partner Ed, they head out to the trailer. They drive down there, and they basically come across what at first glance looks like an explosion. Like the side of this trailer has exploded out. But obviously they can't find any evidence of an explosion. They look around, and there's no obvious fire or anything.
So his partner goes in first, and he calls him over, and he's sat in the car with the girl sort of sleeping on him, and I love the way he sort of tenderly sort of picks her up and moves her onto the seat so that he can get out. It's a really lovely little shot.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as he meets the girl, he's very caring for her immediately. He puts his arm around her. He's making sure she's okay as they drive to this home. And it really sets him up as just this lovely character, this lovely guy.
But massively acerbic.
Yes.
He has some. I mean, there's a line that comes up in a bit that absolutely made me crack up because he just has these amazing little acid-tongued lines that are just brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. So they can't find any money being stolen. There's blood.
And did you know? This is something I didn't know. Did you notice the money?
Yeah.
I didn't realise at this point in like film history sort of thing, you weren't allowed to show money on screen.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in classic movies where it's like clearly fake money. It's weird. Yeah. That is a thing I've noticed over the years with certain periods of films.
I guess I've never really thought about it, but when I was looking things up, it was like, that's just really weird.
It's like this is our stand-in for money. It's odd
because it does look like Monopoly money. It's really sort of fake looking.
It really does. Yeah. But they see there's blood there, and they estimate the blood's been there for less than 12 hours. They think so. It's quite recent. But what they do find is they find I think Ben finds a piece of plastic that matches the doll's head, fits the thing, and a bit of her cloth from her dressing gown. And he also finds some sugar cubes. I wonder what that could be.
Yeah.
And they also find this mysterious print in the sand, and they're like, I've never seen like a dog or an animal make that kind of print.
Wildcats don't tend to come down this far into the desert.
Yeah. So, before long, obviously, ambulance is on the scene, police teams are there looking at the crime scene. I think Ed says, this was broken out, not in.
Yeah, he says it was broken out, not in.
Which is weird because presumably the giant ant broke in first and then broke out, but I
guess I've been thinking about how this works because he says this again later, and I'm guessing they use their mandibles to make the holes, and then I guess they pull it towards them.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, so it pulled it out. Yeah, that does make sense. Actually, you've worked that out for me because I was in my brain. I was like, how?
I think that they sort of manipulate it with their
makes sense.
Mandibles and pull it out.
No, you're right because later the professor will show us real life ants moving the pebble, and they grab it with the mandibles and move it. So you're right. You've solved that mystery. Well done. This
is where you get that great line. You've got the forensic guys coming in, and he says to the hey, how's the kids? He says, oh, fine, got another one on the way, and he went, happy for you, sort of thing. And he's like, wow, that was you really cared about that, didn't you?
Oh, I love it.
He says, just good for you. He just walks off.
But you get the impression that even the ambulance drivers know that Ben really wants to look after this kid and is really overprotective of her, because the ambulance attendant's like, I assure you I'll take good care of her, don't worry, she'll be fine.
I think it's fine.
And of course this is where we first hear that noise, the noise of the ants, which they're like, oh, that's weird wind. But there's this great shot where they hear it and the girl's led back in the ambulance, and then she sits up. And neither of them notice her sit up, and you just get that look.
They're all looking the other way, so they don't notice her get up.
And then she returns back down before they turn back around. It's a lovely shot. I just think it's really well done, especially for the time. You know, it's the kind of thing you expect now, but it is just like, oh, that was a really nice touch that she obviously recognizes it, and it tells the audience that, oh, this is, this is.
I think that's
part of the puzzle.
One of the weird things about this movie is it's kind of, for the first sort of 20 or 30 minutes, it's filmed as a sort of a mystery movie, really, because
I was thinking this. It is kind of in 3 acts, isn't it? You've got the mystery, then you've got the bit in the desert, and then you've got the bit in the city.
And the thing is it was sold so heavily on the fact that it's a giant ant movie.
Yeah, it's not much of a mystery.
It's a surprise to no one that there are giant ants in this movie.
I kind of look at it like a bit like Columbo.
Yeah,
where, you know, you're watching them piece it together rather than.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's not. Even though you know their thing, they're not. It's not boring. They're doing.
No, it's interesting. It's fun watching them get to the. You know,
and they're doing their jobs. So you definitely go with them, but it does seem very odd. Yeah.
So you know, the ambulance heads off, and Ben and Ed decide they're going to go visit. I think he's called Gramps Johnson. He runs the local store. And, you know, they just think, well, he might know something. You know, he presumably sells to these people who live here. So they head off and they get there, I think, in the early evening.
There's a storm coming, isn't there?
There's a storm coming. And this is one of the many things that, like, I'm sure it's coincidence. I'm sure. Especially due to Aliens being the sequel to Alien. So a lot of what Aliens came from Ridley. That howling wind on LV-426 always reminds me of them. And the bits in the tunnels at the end of this always reminds me of Aliens. Really heavily. And I like to the point where I was always wondered whether James Cameron saw this movie and then thought, oh, you know, that's, you know, whether it kind of subconsciously or consciously.
And I think it's the same with Aliens as well. With in the end with the flamethrower.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah,
very. You know, I think they must have.
They must have subconsciously, if nothing else. I feel like it really feels like Aliens towards the end of this movie. But yeah, so they get to the store, and then like I said, you got the wind, and obviously the store's completely fucked. But again, no sign of a robbery.
Yeah.
But they do find a shotgun that's basically been bent in half.
Yeah, so it's the lever action, isn't it? It's and at some point they say that he was a really good shot as well. And later on, when they talk about him, they say he's a really good shot, so he wouldn't have missed.
Yeah.
And again, the side of the building is completely taken out.
Yeah.
And there's a big pile of sugar on the floor.
Yes, again, the only thing linking the two crime scenes is the sugar.
Yeah.
But they find the dead body. He's in the below the store in like the storage basement, I guess.
Yeah.
And again, they notice
very dead.
Very dead. Not just dead, very dead.
He's very dead, yeah.
They also notice, obviously, the wall has similarly here been ripped away, like the trailer. And yeah, like you said, it's like an insane amount of sugar has been turned over in there, and I think there's even like little ants in there, isn't there?
There are ants there because he runs his fingers through it, and there's all the ants swarming it.
Yeah. So Ben then leaves the store, and he's like, "Hey, buddy, you just stay here and look after this place, and I'm sure you'll be fine."
He almost hands him a red jersey, doesn't he?
Yeah, he might as well have done. Yeah, you might as well have done.
Here, you stay here. Hold and wear this.
And of course, Ed starts hearing the noise, and he's like, "Oh, you know, what's going on here?" And he walks outside to investigate, and we then hear a Wilhelm scream. And he sees the creature and I
can't remember whether I think the first Wilhelm scream is later, isn't it? But there are like
there's a bunch,
5 in this movie. I think it's
although to this film's
I've
credit,
ever heard Wilhelm's scream.
Well, yeah, to its credit, I think the film that the Wilhelm scream came out in 1953.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So it's like a year later. So you know, this is probably the first film that. I think the sin is that this film uses it about 6 times.
Yeah.
Not the fact that it uses it, just the fact that it uses it so much.
I think every film should have.
Should have one.
Every film deserves at least one Wilhelm scream.
Do you know what's really funny? Like before I saw this film as a kid, I always assumed associated the Wilhelm scream with like Lucas. Like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Lucasfilm.
I was thinking, I know that film. I'm trying to place that film. Yeah, no, I see what you mean. Yeah,
because that's probably where I first heard it, and then obviously you see films like this, and you're like, oh, actually,
the first place I saw that heard the scream as well.
But yeah, so Ed, we hear the gunshots from his revolver, and then we hear the scream off camera, effective shot.
Yeah.
So we then see the police headquarters. About the only time you see this guy actually being a policeman in his own office. We got the captain there, and they're all just basically like, we haven't got a fucking clue what's happened here. And
no one knows what the footprint is.
Yeah, they're like, we've no idea what this footprint is. They've got the match of the fingerprints on the trailer. And they said that the family's on extended vacation or something. So we get an FBI agent turns up.
Well, first of all, do we get the doctor first?
I think it's around this point.
Because I remember because I love the doctor says
the causes of death.
Yeah. He says basically neck and back broken, chest crushed, skull fractured. And I like this. One for Sherlock Holmes had enough formic acid in his body to kill 20 men. Well, that's nothing like overkill on someone, is there?
No. But yeah, so then they get the telegram, don't they, from the bureau, saying to meet the doctors at the airport. You
get Robert Graham turn up James Arnez as Robert Graham.
James Arnez, yeah.
The and see him I know very well because I used to watch Gunsmoke with my granddad.
Yeah.
And I'd completely forgotten that he has the record now with Kelsey Grammer of playing the same character for the longest period of time. He played the same character for 20 years. Yeah, same character for 20 years, and so is Kelsey Grammer played Fraser for 20 years as well.
Yeah. Interesting.
And he was huge. The dude was 6'7".
He looks big in this, to be honest.
He's absolutely massive. Yeah, and apparently he has the opposite. He had the opposite problem to Tom Cruise in that
he was too tall.
He had to stand in ditches for most of his roles, and other people had to stand on boxes to be around him because he was so massive.
So anyway, even the FBI have been unable to identify this print, and they sent it to the Department of Agriculture, and this is where the doctors have got involved.
Yeah.
So we get the plane arrive, and first of all we have Edmund Gwenn, who is I love him in this movie. He's so adorable. Yeah. He's just adorable.
Yeah. Of course, he's mostly remembered as Kris Kringle
Miracle
from
on 24th Street, right? Yeah. And he's so charming and adorable in this movie.
He's the epitome of ditzy scientist, isn't he?
He is. One of the things I really like about this movie, though, that kind of differentiates it in many ways from a lot of science fiction films that follow it, is that not once in this movie we've got scientists and you know Medford in this, Harold Medford, he's like, these are fascinating, these are amazing, they're such amazing species. We still need to fucking kill them all, though. Kill them fucking all. Not at any point during this movie does a scientist go, well, we should keep some for scientific study. They're like, no, blow them all up.
Maybe that trope hadn't quite hit yet.
No, it clearly hadn't. And it's kind of refreshing when you watch it. You're like, yes, you're doing the sensible thing.
No, we're just going to...
You can study the carcasses all you want. Yeah. But anyway, of course, next
he says, I mean, he does say, basically, if we don't stop
it's
them...
the end of us is the dominant species.
Yeah, humanity is just going to be toast. It's as simple as that.
Well, yeah, because he says, like, how many eggs they lay and how many they could potentially breed, you know, the rate. And he's like, we'll just be overwhelmed by these giant ants. But of course, then legs appear from the plane, and they're all the guys just immediately, like I said, they're like, "Oh my god, it's a woman!
It's a woman doctor!"
They all just stare over at her, and she's trapped on the plane, isn't she? But she's like, "I can sort myself out."
Yeah, her skirt's caught on the door or something.
Yeah, but they're she can sort herself out, and she says like, "No, I'm fine. Leave me alone. We'll do it."
What I like is that they didn't come in a passenger plane. They were brought in a bomber.
Yeah, it's like a B-52, right?
Yeah,
or B-25. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it is, but
it's written here as a B-25, so
right,
I'm assuming that's probably right. I don't know planes all that well, so.
You know the difference between a bomber and a commercial plane, though.
Yes. Yes.
Because the hole they're getting out of is the passengers don't usually get out of that.
Not generally, but I guess they were sent via the military, right?
Yeah, I suppose so.
So it's probably like a military plane, I guess. But we will get to something in a bit because there is. I don't know much about aircraft, but I do know that the helicopters they use in this are fucking ugly. They're like the ugliest helicopters.
Do you know what? I've got a real soft spot for those ugly helicopters.
Do you? I guess they are charming in their own ugly way.
Yeah, they're really. I like them. I've got a sort of soft spot for crates.
Okay. Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Crates and things.
Yeah.
I love a good when I'm playing something like what's it called? Oh god, that game that came out broken and didn't get fixed for about 5 years.
That's Cyberpunk.
No, the one before that, the biggest one before that, the space one.
Elite.
No.
Oh no, fucking Star Citizen.
No Man's
Sky. Yes, No Man's Sky is actually a pretty good game these days.
Yeah, it's really good now. But I loved. Just give me a massive crate that I can fly around in. I like a good crate.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like the Falcon.
Yeah. You want the underdog ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair
enough. I like a good sleek ship as well. I'll have it, but I've got a real soft spot for something that looks like it shouldn't be flying.
Sure.
And those helicopters really look like they shouldn't be flying.
They're like the least aerodynamic things you've ever seen.
They even in the like the Batman animated series, I think they've got helicopters like that in there.
They do, and blimps.
Yeah, of course. That's one of the reasons why I love the animated series.
Yeah, it is amazing. But yeah, so immediately Bob's like, I like her. She's good.
Yeah, he says something along the lines of, maybe I'll get a fever if she's the type of doctors that look after that. Sort of.
Yeah.
And of course, we know it's very sexist, but I don't care. It's 1954. What do you expect?
Yeah. It's 54, and it's a movie of its time. There's not really a love triangle. It's kind of just from the start. It would have. I mean, ultimately, it would have resolved itself anyway because one of them gets knackered. But like, it's not really. It's not really ever in question. I'm assuming people that listen to this podcast have watched the movie before.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what are you doing? You should watch the movie and then we'll talk about it. But there's never really any talk of that, which is another kind of difference from these kind of movies going forward, where usually there'll be that rivalry between the two lead guys, But yeah, so Dr. Medford, Harold, male Dr. Medford, wastes no time, and he's like, just wondering, where was that atomic bomb let off in 1945 around here? Yeah, just curious.
I love that they're sort of busy beavering around and discussing things and looking up stuff, and they're like
and looking
really
at his daughter.
Impatient with them. They're like, "Come on, Doc, we're big people. You can tell us. You don't have to sugarcoat it.
Because he's walking around and he says things like, 9 years ago, yes, genetically, certainly possible. And they're just like, what are you talking about? Tell us stuff. But he basically refuses to explain until they're sure, right?
He's ready, yeah.
He's like, well, look, it's just a theory, and I'm not saying until then. They want to go and visit the girl that they found. They want to go, so they go to the hospital to see if they can speak to her. When they get there, the psychiatrist basically says, look, she won't speak. She's mute. She's in shock. We can't bring her out of shock. We've tried, there's no way you're going to get anything out of her. But the Dr. Medford is like, hey, can you get me a small glass? And she's like, yeah, sure. What's that for? And he's like, acid.
Yeah.
She's like, what? And he's like, oh, just formic acid. Don't worry. It might give her the jolt she needs to
throw it in the child's face.
Just throw it at her. That'll get a reaction. So he puts the glass under her nose, and she immediately upon smelling it, she wakes from her shock, and she starts screaming "them," which is where the title of the film comes from.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the most iconic like B-movie moments, isn't it? That
100%. So they head back and visit the trailer site after this. And now we've got this raging sandstorm, so they've all got the sand glasses on.
Yeah, except for the prof who has them round his neck for some reason.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for the actors, man. Like, they must have ingested so much sand giving their dialogue in some of these scenes.
Yeah.
Because you can see it's blowing right in their mouths as they're talking. And bless them, they just keep...
Well, not only that, the two docs are in, like, wool clothing, and apparently the temperature's got up to 110 degrees on the set.
Well, because it does look like they're doing it outdoors. It doesn't look like it's on a soundstage or anything. So I think they were just getting sand blown at them in this horrendous heat for like days on end. Yeah,
and apparently Gwen was full of arthritis. He was in constant pain.
But he didn't. I mean, didn't he died a couple of years after this movie, right? He didn't. I don't think he lasted like more than 5-6 years after this.
59 he died.
Oh, okay. So you're a reasonable amount of time after. But either way, he's a bit old to be mucking about in the desert.
Wandering around in the desert.
But as we always say, it's a different generation, people back then. But Pat says that, is that she thinks is slim pickings for food. But they might turn carnivorous because of the lack of food, right?
Yeah.
So, or maybe they've got a taste for blood now. And of course, the doctor agrees, and so like Bob's like, hang on a minute, guys. Now you're talking about something turning carnivorous. What are you talking about, guys? And again, he refuses to say. But Pat's like, look, like we will tell you when we're sure. They find another print. And he measures it, and he's like, "Oh, it's going to be over 8 feet long." Of course, Pat, very iconic scene. She wanders off on her own, looking for more prints. I'm sure most people, even if you haven't seen this film, you've probably seen this shot where she's looking for prints, and then you hear the noise, and then over the sand dune comes the giant ant. The first of the giant ants that we see on screen, obviously she screams and backs away. And again, I love it. No one is like, oh my god, it's giant ant or anything like that. They instantly are like, gun, shoot it. Yeah. Like that is, kill it. And they immediately start shooting their guns. Lots of gunfire in this film. It's quite a violent movie in terms of gun shots. And they start shooting at it.
I've seen less bloody gangster movies with less Tommy guns in gangster movies than in this movie.
I wonder if it's one of those things like we have these days where it's like, well, if you're shooting the shit out of an alien, I guess it's fine as long as it's not a person.
Yeah, maybe.
Although there probably wasn't much of a code in the 50s.
I would have thought so. Not for
what they want.
Not for guns, I don't think.
Not
that way.
But so obviously Medford sees the giant ant attacking his daughter, and he says, like, shoot the antenna. He's helpless without his antennas. So he's the FBI officer shooting the antennas, and Ben's like, I've had enough of this. He runs back to his car and gets his police issue machine gun.
Yeah, he gets his Tommy gun out.
Which, of course.
I mean, I was expecting him to get a shotgun.
Yeah,
I was expecting shotgun. I was not really expecting Tommy gun.
I know.
He's not in Chicago.
It's so good. It's so good. No one questions anything.
I'm going to have to look up how...
It might be. Maybe they did. I don't know.
We're standard issue on police cars back then.
It might have been. Like you, I expected a shotgun.
Yeah.
When he ran back, I was like, of course he's going for a shotgun. Nope. Machine gun. And basically, yeah, just fills it with lead. And obviously the creature ultimately passes away. Medford says what species it is, and then basically says, yeah, it's an ant. And obviously, of course, his findings or suspicions have been founded. It was a species of ant that has been mutated due to the radiation of the atomic testing in the desert.
Yeah.
Which will become the plot of every horror and science fiction movie for the next decade.
Yep. And we'll still pop up from time to time.
Even now.
Even now.
Yeah. So we cut to later, and they're in their ugly helicopters, looking for the nests.
They're constantly making the proper bumbling scientist. Like he can't figure out how to put his goggles on. He can't figure out how a radio works.
I've already said over. Like, no, you gotta say
really
it again.
Pissed off when the guy explains that you have.
I love when he acts like a child. He's like, "Oh, now you're happy."
Yeah, he's a proper petulant child.
He's great. I love him so much in this. It looks like he's having so much fun playing this character.
Yeah,
you know.
I do love that nobody really gets angry with him though. They're all sort of just look at him like, oh, he's okay. It's the ops guy. We're fine.
We get the bit with that. I love when he's like, he gets distracted and you're like, oh, they found the nest, and he's like, oh no, that's not it. Thought it might have been, it's not. And of course Pat's the one that finds the mound because she's in a separate helicopter.
Yeah.
They find the mound, and they see a giant ant with a rib cage.
I love that shot of the rib cage rolling down the hill into the skull.
Yeah.
And like you've got the copper's ammo belt and stuff. Wow, they really did a number on that, didn't they?
Yeah, and then you get Pat, like, you know, they go and investigate all of the bones and stuff, and she's just like, I think you find your missing persons. There they are.
Yeah.
Cheers, Pat.
It's a bit cold, isn't it?
It's a little. But
I guess it's just that she's a scientist. It's like, well, there they are.
Yeah, there they are. Don't worry about it. So later at the FBI office, you know, they kind of confront Medford, you know, about his inconsistencies, and Medford says, look, you know, secrecy is paramount, and time is the most important thing right now.
Yeah.
And like, so the general's like, bomb the shit out of it now.
Yeah.
And Medford's like, look, most of the ants won't even be in the nest now, because it's too cold at night. It's cold at night, so they go out. They don't like the heat of the sand and the heat of the day. So we need to go when the sun is at its highest and the day is at its hottest, because then they will be all in underground. Which kind
of doesn't make sense, because a couple of times you see them running around during the day.
During the day, yeah. And then, you know, he's like, hey, we need to make the surface as hot as possible. So, like, well, we could fire bazookas to keep the heat up. And then we'll throw in cyanide gas grenades, and they'll suffocate and die from the cyanide.
Yeah.
And then we'll go in with flamethrowers and hope that the cyanide doesn't explode. We won't talk about it. It'll be fine, even though there's like a fine mist on the floor, which I assumed was the cyanide, and they're all wearing masks. It's fine. I don't know if cyanide gas explodes.
Honestly, I don't know either.
It might not, but I've always thought I wouldn't have taken that risk.
Yeah, I'll pass, please.
Yeah, I'll pass with that, thanks. So anyway, I
love that the flamethrower is a proper army issue.
Yeah,
they were manned by real veterans.
Yeah. Well, it's probably cheaper just to use a real one than build a fake one, you know. But anyway, they go ahead, and as we said before, the sergeant, for no apparent reason now, is in charge and has bazookas, and he's blowing up the nest.
I mean, at this point in a normal movie, he'd have just been left behind.
It's like, this isn't your jurisdiction. Like, the military are here to deal with this problem now. But no.
I mean, you always get in a lot of these movies, you get the guy who finds it, like his character. He'd find excuses, or he'd sneak in.
But they don't even address it.
No, they don't. He's just in charge now.
Yeah, he just goes everywhere. From this point on, he is on the front lines.
Yeah.
In any situation. Meanwhile, like, I don't know, murders and drug deals are happening in his town where he's meant to be working. Yeah. But he's off dealing with the ants.
I mean, I don't really know much about New Mexico.
He's probably they're all dead now from the ants.
My guess is he's probably in one of those
out of a job. That's the reality.
Nothing happens.
Yeah.
This is the most that's ever happened in that town.
Well, and depending on how big it is, they might have all been killed by ants now. So maybe he's like, well, I'm out of a job. I'll just come along with you guys.
I don't have a place anymore. It's dead.
So anyway, they blow up the surface to make it nice and warm, and then they throw in the gas grenades. They see one ant worker trying to escape, so they blow it away with a machine gun. And then, again, Bob and Ben decide they're going to go in the nest.
Yep.
Pat says, "Hey, I'm going to go down as well." And Bob's like, "How dare you? You're a woman. You can't go down there." And, she's like, I'm the bloody expert. My father's too old to go down there.
He can't do it.
You don't know what you're looking for. I'm going down there.
Yeah.
And she should have said, and besides, why are you two fucks going down there? It's like, there's no reason for you to be going down either.
Yeah.
But, they don't question it. So, but yeah, this is what I like about her character. She isn't like, she's like, no, I'm going down there. Tough shit. You guys deal with it. So they go down.
She looks good at the jumpsuit too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a kind of Ripley vibes going on.
Yeah.
And they get down there, and they're shocked to find these ants, but of course Pat's like, they're dead. They would have attacked us immediately if they were alive. And they head through, cautiously walking amongst the ant corpses, when suddenly a wall collapses and some ants attack them, and of course they blow them all away. And of course Pat says, well, they would have died, but it looks like the bombing caused this cave-in, and so they were kind of separated from the rest and sheltered from the gas.
I also love that there were a lot of scenes, especially with the flamethrowers and things, that you get which just show that this movie was going to be 3D.
Yes, yeah,
so
you do get the obvious 3D shots, yeah. Yes. It's always I love this era of cinema, but 3D is like I love House of Wax, but the goddamn scene with the flipping yo-yo that goes on for ages, and it's like, oh, just stop with the 3D.
Oh god, there are so many movies where there's just like people poking things at you.
And the thing is, it's no better nowadays. They do the same goddamn thing in 3D movies now, and it's like, God, have we learned nothing? It was annoying then, it's annoying now.
But I think we're due another round, because it's been a while since...
And Avatar's just come out again.
Yeah.
It does feel like it's on its way back, doesn't it?
Because
they're desperate for a gimmick to get you back in the cinema as well.
It does feel like every sort of 10, 15 years that another a couple of 3D movies come out, and people kind of get interested for a bit, and then it's like, well, there's just no point to it. I still think the best 3D movie was Gravity.
Gravity was an experience.
Yeah.
It's not a great movie.
Oh, I love that movie. I think it's a great movie.
It's very
there's so
ridiculous.
Much weird shit in that movie that's like silly, but I don't care. I really love that movie.
In the cinema, I've not watched it since the cinema. And the main reason I haven't is because I'm really worried that it was a bit naff even in the cinema. I was like, this is very silly. But it was such an amazing experience in the cinema in 3D.
I genuinely
took my breath away.
I genuinely ducked when something flew at me. I was
just even the opening when they just pan down over Earth, it took my breath away. It was like, wow.
It's worth watching just for how beautiful it is.
Yeah, it is a gorgeous
movie. And I think it works just because it's all black and there are just little things. I think that's why 3D works so well in that.
Yes, it's well done. But yeah, you're right. There are a lot of shots here that are clearly, we're doing this for 3D, guys.
Yeah.
But not to the extent of things like House of Wax, where it is like offensive. It is at least plot worthy.
I remember when I was a kid that there was I think Channel 4 did a season of
3D.
3D movies, and they sort of you got
I vaguely remember this.
You got the glasses with the TV Times or something.
Yeah, that is ringing a vague bell with me as well.
Yeah, and I remember we didn't have enough. There was like a group of us watching them, and we didn't have enough like glasses, so we'd have to sort of like pass them round to get a decent look at anything. And I remember getting you after a while you end up getting a headache if you haven't. I mean, even if you've got the glasses on, or if you don't have the glasses on, when you've got the sort of the separate things.
Oh yeah, the red blue
colours, and it's like, oh god, it's almost unwatchable.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I remember that happening in the sort of mid late 80s, I think.
It rings a vague bell with me. I might just be imagining it because you've said it, but I do distinctly remember having the 3D glasses, and I feel like when you said, "Oh yeah, it was with the Radio Times,"
I'm pretty sure it was something like that, or it was some sort of TV magazine. I'm sure you got them with.
But anyway, tragedy strikes. They get to the nest and they discover they're too late. Some of the queens have escaped, and they take photos of it and then they burn everything. Obviously,
she's really burn it all, burn everything.
Yeah. But this is what I like. The scientists are sensible in this movie. They're not, they're not like, oh, we should keep one or two. And,
just smuggle some of those eggs out. It'd be fine.
No, kill them all. So yeah, basically later, obviously the Mr. Metford, he says, it was queens, and the human race is doomed now. And I love we get this. Do you know this is another thing as well, where if it was like a modern movie. We've got the doctor, he's in Washington and he's showing the government and military personnel, all about ants, and he's showing them the presentation on ants and these videos on ants. Yeah. And like in a modern movie, almost immediately some asshole general around the table will be like, spare me the documentary, doctor, what are we up to here? What are we facing? And no one, they just sit there and they watch it and they learn. They observe. And it's like, you probably should learn how these creatures behave, because you wouldn't necessarily know, but if you're facing giant ones, it's useful to probably know how they behave and what they do. And, useful to know that they can lift 20 times their body weight. That's terrifying. But yeah, and he says some things that I'm like, is that true? Like things where he's like, they're the only species other than man that have war. And I'm like, you sure? All right. It sounds good for the trailer, but I don't know. Not sure about the science of this, Doctor, but fine.
I must admit, I didn't look into the some of the things.
I didn't look into it, but I raised an eyebrow.
Sounds like you sort of go, all right, okay.
All right, buddy. And a lot of what happens in this movie, you can just put down to them being radioactive and giant. Yeah. But the war thing, I was like, okay. But he says, man is the dominant species of life on Earth, will be extinct within a year. And he even asks another doctor to back him up, and the doctor's like, yeah, probably. He just nods, he's like, just fagging his head like, yeah, probably, we're doomed. So they basically keep it all a secret, but they have all of the news media monitored. And all of the airwaves monitored for key words and key things like flying saucers and giant ants.
I've got a list of what it is.
Oh, have you? Awesome.
Yeah, I've got the list.
Take us through the list, because it is a good list.
Monitor all news for 1. Kidnapping and missing persons. 2. Unsolved murders. 3. Alleged suicides. 4. I can't read my words. Migrating wildlife. 5, theft of sugar, syrups, and sweets. 6, strange phenomena such as flying saucers, strange odors, high-pitched sounds, unnatural things.
Giant ants.
It says, unnatural things, alive or dead.
Luckily,
I suppose the thing is, they say flying saucers, and you just think that is like ridiculous. But I suppose what they really mean is unidentified.
Yeah,
crap.
in the 50s, it just became called flying saucers, and anything was a flying saucer. You see movies where they're talking about flying saucers, and they're not even saucer shaped. They just like that's what they say. They just call them flying saucers, even if they're not actually saucer shaped. It's weird.
Because I don't know. I guess does UFO not come in yet?
I don't know when that came in.
The designation UFO doesn't come until later, maybe?
I have no idea. Because the pilot in a bit says flying saucer, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, Leonard Nimoy's paying attention.
Yes!
And is this his first movie? One of his first? Because it's like before Star Trek, right?
I think so. It's way before Star Trek. So yeah, it's got to be, hasn't it?
I'm assuming. But he's all kind of cocky, and he's like, "Ha! Listen to this stupid stuff." I bet. Yeah. Actually, it's almost like you follow his thought process in real time, where he's chatting this girl up, and he jokes with her. He's like, "Oh, listen to this stupid story," and then he's like, "Well, actually, that sounds exactly like what these people are actually looking for. Maybe I should report this."
Yeah.
And basically, the note is that a pilot crashed his plane whilst witnessing flying saucers that are shaped like ants. He basically has been deemed insane.
Yeah, at the end of the note, it just says it's like they're taking him to the nut house, basically.
yeah. So of course, Bob and Pat head out to find this guy, and they visit him in the nut house, as he calls it, and he says, nobody believes me. Do I look crazy? And he's like, only a crazy person would come up with this story. And then he kind of stops mid-sentence. He's like, oh, you got me.
Yeah.
And he kind of begs them to believe him. And Pat says, hey, tell us a story. We believe you. And so he does. He says exactly what happened. And he begs Bob. He's like, hey, it'd be real neighborly if you could get me out of here, because you believe me and you know I'm not crazy. But of course, as soon as they leave, Bob's like, the doctor's like, hey, I was about to discharge him. And Bob's like, no, he is insane. We'll tell you when he's not insane.
Yeah, I get the impression that they probably forgot about that dude, and he's probably still there.
I thought exactly the same. He died in that fucking hospital.
Yeah, he never got out.
Bob was too busy with Pat.
Yeah.
And he never thought about it. Like, maybe when Bob and Pat were like retired, Bob one day was just suddenly like, oh no.
I think even when everybody knows that ants exist, I still like to, in a very cool way, like to think that they just forgot about him anyway.
I just like the idea of Pat and Bob retired, married and retired together in their old age, and then suddenly Bob's like, oh no. Pat's like, what? And he's like, oh, nothing. Don't worry about it. This is like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, like maybe they're sat there and a plane like a plane lands.
A plane flies past.
A plane lands, and they're like, oh.
Oh no. But yeah, so he's going to be confined until the situation's over, or maybe forever. Yeah. And suddenly we see Medford with Bob, who's still involved, and Medford gets this urgent call, and the USS Viking has had a nest of ants hatch aboard the ship at sea. And we get this great shot of the wireless operator just sending the SOS frantically.
And there's a guy behind, like in the window behind him, like valiantly fighting off this ant. And here you get two health beams.
Yeah. Wow, that helicopter is close. Can you hear that?
No.
Oh my god. I don't know what's going on out there. These giant ants have arrived in Bristol. But yes, so yeah, they eventually the military basically rescue these two guys, the two survivors of the USS Viking, and they sink the ship. And everyone's kind of confused. They're like, well, how did giant ants get on board? And they give an explanation. They say, hey, they had the cargo hold open. They were on shore leave. There was like a skeleton staff. The Queen obviously snuck aboard and saw the hole and thought it was the perfect place to lay its eggs.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, that problem's resolved. But obviously, Metford's like, well, there were more, and they're quite widespread, so they're not quite sure where this is happening or where they're gonna be necessarily. One of the officials says, like, we need to tell the public, Metford's like, no, we'll just cause panic, and we need to avoid panic right now. We'll deal with it secretly until we can't, and then we'll make it public. But we then hear there's been a theft of 40 tons of sugar.
Yeah.
I love that these ants can like smell sugar. I guess they just know where the sugar is, and they're going there. They're stealing all this sugar. But Ben and Bob head off to LA to investigate, and they find this rail yard guy. The detective's like, it's broken into Friday night, and they suspect the yard watchman, and they meet this yard watchman, and he's like, guys, the amount of freight that comes through here, if I was gonna rip off anything, why do you think I would rip off sugar? Like, and he's really sarky with him. He's
not really a black market for sugar.
Yeah. Oh, it's great.
And I love the guy who owns the yard, and the FBI guy walks off, and he says to Ben, "What's a government cop doing here?" And he looks at me and goes, "He's got a sweet tooth."
He's got a sweet tooth. Yeah. What is this cop? What is he doing here?
Yeah.
He's in a completely different city now.
Well, I suppose it doesn't. I mean, he's not wearing a uniform at this point, is he?
No, it's true. They probably just thought he was a...
saying he's a copper, so they probably just thought he was a bloke.
But yeah, so he's like, well, do you really think I would have done this? But anyway...
You also get the feeling that he's not going to get let off the hook either.
No.
He's probably going to end up getting in trouble.
Might, yeah,
He's going to lose his job for it at least.
Yeah, just to keep it quiet and not say what happened. But yeah, so Ben questions Mrs. Lodge about the death of her husband, and Bob and Ben go to the morgue to see the body, and he's like, I don't think that a machine ripped him in half and dismembered his arm and then cut his face up. I think there might be something else at play here. And he says, like, the death was like loss of blood and shock, basically. Lodge was apparently with his two children, but they can't find any. He was found alone in his car. Kids aren't there, and neither was his arm. His arm is gone. Can't find his arm. So Bob heads out and questions Mrs. Lodge, who again, very realistic portrayal of a grieving person. I think she does a really good job. Yeah. Ben goes to get her some water. Bob gets her some water, and then Ben comes in and he's like, "Can we have a word outside?" They look at the map of the city, don't they? Where they found the body, and they're basically like, "Hey, these two cops, they've made arrests today. Who have you arrested in the intervening time?" And they're like, "Well, there's a bunch of drunks that we there's a one speeding ticket and like 3 or 4 drunks, isn't there?"
Yeah.
And so they get them in. They're like, "Well, bring them in. We're gonna talk to them because maybe they saw something." And
they go to the hospital ward, don't they? They go to the drunk ward.
Oh, they do in a bit, but they bring these people in, don't they?
Yes, the two.
You get the blonde woman who was like, "I was seeing a sick friend, and I don't want to mention him because he's married."
Yeah.
And then you got the two or three drunk guys. There's two drunks, and then the third one's in the hospital, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You got the two drunks that are just taking the piss and clearly.
Yeah, they're just taking the piss and they're playing a game of something, are they?
Yeah. Yeah, and they said like, "I'll take him to the tank and sleep it off, and we'll go see the other guy." And they're like, "Where's the other guy?" And he's like, "Well, he's in the alcoholic ward in the hospital.
Yeah,
he's something of a regular
the alcoholic ward."
Yeah. So they head there, and they meet this guy who is awesome. He is so funny.
He's the same dude that gets it in the Blob at the beginning.
Yes, he is. Yeah. And we also get Harry Wilson cameo in a minute.
Yes,
with the please my nerves.
Yes,
which is always weird when you see people like that turn up in movies, because he's one of those people that's like he just used to be in every movie at the time because he just had that face. I think it's just that face and that voice. You're like,
I think that you, especially in the sort of the sort of 50s, you get a lot of those sort of character actors that would literally just a face.
Yes, yeah.
That would turn up. Mm-hmm. They kind of play pretty much the same character in every movie.
Yeah.
I suppose I always wonder whether they made a pretty good living at that.
I would imagine they made a reasonable living.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they're in the movies they tend to be in the movies for very long. So
they do a lot. I reckon they do a lot, though. I reckon they show up in a lot of things in a short space of time.
Mm.
But anyway, they managed to get the story out of this guy. But like all the way through, he's like, "Hey, why don't I'll join the military if you give me booze." Basically,
yes.
He starts singing like
That's what was funny as well is the other guy when they turn up, the other guy says, "Are you here for the draft?" And they're all like drafted. So they all look like they're about 60 odd.
Yeah,
like, no one's drafting you guys at all.
I do love
even if you were like sober and straight.
I do love the general this with them. His reaction, he just kind of laughs and he's like, "No, you're all right. Don't worry about it."
Yeah.
You'll be fine. But anyway, while they're talking to this drunk, he keeps saying like, "Oh, they've gone now," and he says it didn't look big enough for them, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "It didn't look big enough for the ants," and they're going like, "Oh, okay, maybe he did see something."
Yeah.
And then they ask him, "Well, where did you see these ants?" And he says, "Down there," and they realize that the like waterway is dry, right? The lake bed that they've got running through the city is currently free of water, and of course it has massive drainage sewer tunnels that would be perfect for ants to live in, giant ants anyway. So they
go to there. They don't once bump into Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta.
No, they don't. Not once. I think it was maybe a couple of years too early.
Yeah, I think so too. But
I mean, God, that would have been amazing if Grease had ended with like a giant ant just attacking the car mid race.
I just had I had this sort of vision of like all these greasers getting eaten by ants,
or the T-1000's truck getting smashed into by a giant ant. But yeah, the weird one with Grease is because it's the same time period ish within a few years of these two events happening. You could almost think, it's the same place maybe. But yeah, so they head down to the riverbed, and they find a model airplane, and they're like, "Oh, this might actually." They also find an ant print, don't they? So like, okay, the drunk was telling the truth. Go and find out if the kid's mother knows that this is one of their model planes. Like maybe she'll know.
I'm not overly sure about the geography of where those things are and where.
I have no idea.
But I'm sure there were like fields that are pretty close to that. Why did they go there to fly the plane?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she says something along the lines of they're strapped for cash, so he's got another job on the weekend, and he takes the kids out super early to fly to do something each day because they've only got a couple of hours. And I'm guessing maybe it's just super local. Like it's like on their doorstep.
Okay,
so there. That was I don't know. I'm giving the film too much credit, but you know.
No, I buy that. I'm fine. That's fine.
I don't know.
I'm happy with that thought.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, they surmise that, you know, this is where the attack happened, and that the kids might have ran into the tunnel, which would be a silly place to go.
Yeah.
Under the circumstances. Well, actually, probably a sensible thought in the time. But
yeah, if you're a kid, you're well,
shelter, right?
Your first instinct would be to run and hide, wouldn't it? I think. And where else is better than a cave? I suppose is it for all intents and purposes, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So they now decide, in the interests of public safety, they're going to have a curfew.
Yeah.
And so they say, you know, curfew's in place. And they basically tell the whole story.
Yeah.
Giant ants were found in New Mexico, and they are now in the storm drains under Los Angeles. And the military are going to blow them all up. But, you know, stay inside.
Yeah.
And of course...
You know, originally it was going to be in New York.
I didn't know that. Was that just for budgetary purposes? They didn't do it?
Yeah, originally it was going to be set in New York, and it was going to be in the underground.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then they basically just decided not to.
Oh, the ants could have fought the alligators.
Yeah. When did the Legends of the Alligator?
I don't know. That's such a silly one as well, isn't it? I love
no, but it's a real thing, though, isn't it?
Is it?
I'm sure it's actually a true thing. It's not just. I mean, I know alligator. I love alligators. It's a really silly.
Yeah.
That I love. But I'm maybe I.
It might be.
I'm pretty certain that there's a certain grain of truth.
I'm gonna have to look that up
about the alligators in the sewer.
I'm gonna have to look that up later once we finish it. I'm gonna fall down a YouTube rabbit hole.
Probably, yeah.
But anyway, so curfew's in place, and they've set up a field headquarters outside the storm drain where the model plane was found. Some assholes why are we wasting all this time looking for these kids? They're dead anyway.
I love this bit is great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Because he's really sort of I'm not you know, because he says basically let's just go in there, burn everything, destroy everything, and he's like, no, there were 2 kids in there, and the guy's like, I don't, you know, I'm not going to wait just for 2 kids, and he says to him, well, you want to tell the mother that, and the camera
she's over there, yeah.
And the camera sort of pans over, and the pans back, and the dude's like, "All right, I get your point."
Yeah, and he actually shows humility, and he's like, "Oh, actually, shit, yeah, all right."
Yeah, it's a lovely little scene.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. So anyway, this cop from the desert is now leading these military men through the tunnels. And that's fine, or at least one of the groups. He's with one of the groups. They all head in, and I think they're about a mile in, and Ben's I can hear something.
In jeeps, they sort of move around and stuff.
Yes, yeah, and he tells everyone to stop because he can hear a noise. And they realize that the section that he can hear the noises from is under construction, so it's not finished. It's all you know, still under construction back there. And of course he investigates, and he finds the 2 children. They're trapped, and they're about to be attacked by giant ants. And
this is a really, really fucking good scene.
I love this. Do you know what I love so much about this scene? Is he gets in there, he attacks the ants, and his one concern is getting the kids out. He gets the first kid out, and he can see the ant coming, and he knows he's fucked. He's like, I could save myself or this kid. Yeah. And he knows it. And he grabs the kid, puts the kid up there, knowing full well. I always assumed he knew full well.
I think so.
Full well. Because he sees it, he clocks the ant, and he knows. But he's like, no, child first.
He turns his back. He literally turns his back so that he's not, he's protecting the kid.
Yeah. But of course, the ant grabs Ben just after he saves the kids, and basically crushes him, I guess, to death. Yeah. Ultimately dies from this.
I completely forgot that he died.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I'd completely forgotten that he dies, because I don't think I mean, as I said, I don't think I'd seen this since I was a teenager.
No, that's fair.
And I got way more attached to his character.
He's great.
He's my favourite
really
character. And I got so attached to him. I was like, oh my god, they've killed the best character, my favourite character.
He is kind of the hero of the piece, really.
Yeah.
Like, more so than Bob.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Bob is heroic in it, but Ben is the, like, proper action man.
Yeah.
You know, he always feels like Action Man because he's all these outfits as well. Like the old Action Men used to buy the outfits for them. It's like, oh well, now Ben's a police officer. Now he's a military guy.
Yeah.
But yes, so Ben has been crushed to death. And obviously everyone turns up, including Bob. Sorry.
He gets a Wilhelm scream as well.
He does get a Wilhelm scream, yeah. And then everyone turns up and they gun down the ants. And I think Bob speaks to Ben, and Ben's kind of dying breath is basically like, I put the kids through there. They're you know, help them basically before he dies. So unfortunately the tunnel collapses, and you know, he heads in, and then the tunnel collapses due to all the gunfire, presumably, and the ants tunneling around, probably, and he's trapped inside, and he's the soldiers are trying to dig to get to him.
Again, it's a really good sense of peril. I mean,
especially when because again he gets really close and he screams and like rolls out of the way, and it's like, God, he might actually die here, you know, because you could end up with the military and Pat being the only one surviving, you know. But he's a proper action man, and he guns these ants back, and of course in the nick of time, just in the nick of time, the military get in and kind of with the assist and save him, and then they come across the egg chamber, and Bob's like, hey, no, do not kill them yet, wait for Pat, and then Pat comes in, she looks and she's like, okay, I think we've got them all, we're in time, because he's like, oh God, are we in time? And she's like, yep, I think we're in time now, we can we've got them all. They're all here, and we see the queens with their little wings. What I
do like is they only made 3 ants, so you only ever get batches of 3.
Yeah, but it's really effective because you can't tell for most of the movie.
Yeah,
I think they did a good job. And I love the actual ant designs. I think they're really cool.
Yeah, really weird on the poster though. Why the poster's got they got cat eyes on the poster.
Oh, the poster's doing that typical thing as well, where they've like grabbed Pat suddenly in a red dress, and she's been grabbed by them. It's like really ill-fitting poster. Is it a red dress they're in? She is in a red dress. Yeah, she's in a short red dress that she never wears. Yeah, fantastic. I love it. I love. I've got a real love of that old poster art that bears no resemblance to the actual movie, but looks awesome. Especially when you get those lower budget movies. Like, it was almost like an unwritten rule of the video shop and like movie posters, where like the lower the budget and the worse the movie is, the better the poster is.
Better the poster, yeah.
It's like all the money went into that poster art. It's amazing. It's like they got some like Frazetta level painting for.
Yeah, and I think it was literally they just basically got stock paintings. Probably from
old sci-fi. Yeah,
exactly, from what was either from Weird magazine or something like that. And they just basically went, "That'll do.
That'll do it."
I
wouldn't be
on the
surprised.
cover of that has nothing to do with what the creature in the movie is, but it'll do nicely.
Yeah,
people will buy this video.
I think you're probably right. I would not be surprised if that was the case. So anyway, we get Doctor.
It was a love-hate thing though, because when we were kids and we were getting those movies, sometimes it was just funny and you'd be fun, but sometimes it was so disappointing.
Yeah, it's so deceptive, and you're like, this is nothing like what you've put on the poster.
And sometimes the movies were so bad that there was no amount could save the movie.
No, I agree. Sometimes it was just straight up bullshit.
Yeah.
But anyway, the flamethrowers go off and they kill the queen and all of the male winged ants, and then we of course get Dr. Metford with his line, when man entered the atomic age, he opened a door to a new world. What we'll eventually find in that new world, nobody can predict.
Yeah.
And then it's like the slow motion zoom on the ants on fire. And so it's that. It's that.
Say at one point as well that they say about these ants were mutated from the bomb in 1940 something.
How many bombs have gone off since then?
Testing lately?
Yeah. And he's like, who knows? I think they talk about that just before that line, actually.
Yeah.
So again, much like Godzilla, we have that nuclear warning. A lot more kind of sensationalized and a lot less kind of serious here. But it still remains.
Again, like you said, though, I think the major difference is that
we didn't get nuked.
In Godzilla, they're the victims.
Godzilla's the victim as well in Godzilla. Yeah.
It's all
everyone's a fucking victim in Godzilla.
Yeah. Whereas in this one, it's a lot more.
The ants are horrible and nasty and evil, and they just need to be obliterated.
Yeah.
Whereas from the moment Godzilla turns up, it's only a matter of time before they kill Godzilla, and Godzilla is I mean, we've gone through it a lot.
Yeah.
But I love them. I think it's a solid movie.
It really is.
And like,
do you know what? Actually, when we were talking about it the other week, and we made the decision, and afterwards I thought, it's been a long time since I've seen this. I remember it I really remember loving it.
Yeah.
And for a moment, I did think, oh God, is this gonna be one of those times where I'm disappointed? Yeah. Is it going to turn out to be a really bad movie? And it fucking isn't.
No, it's great. It still holds up.
It's great.
It's really good.
Monster movie.
Yeah.
And it completely holds up. I think
so.
Sure, the ants are dated, but they still hold up.
In black and white, it works.
Props. Yeah, I think they were painted like green and purple.
Yeah, I think that would have been awful.
So I think in colour, probably been pretty bad.
Yeah,
but they work so well in the black and white, and it's a genuinely good monster movie. I'm so glad
as fuck.
Because it's everybody in it's great, and James Whitmore, he was in a few
brilliant
these sort of movies, but I think these days he's mostly remembered as the guy in Shawshank, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's Brooks in Shawshank, that has that really tragic end.
Yeah.
In Shawshank, and he's and in this, I absolutely adored him. He's so good.
He's brilliant.
Ben is my favorite monster movie characters. I think after
he is up there. He is up there. He's great, and I mean this movie, it's the same as. Same as Godzilla in Japan. It's the same as Mad Max 2. It's the same as Conan the Barbarian. It set a trend.
Yep.
And then a lot of good, but a lot of shit came out of it.
Yeah.
And
this one got basically made because of the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Yes, which is another film I love.
It was so well received that they wanted it. I think Warner Brothers kind of passed, and Paramount were like, "Oh well, we'll have it." And then Warner Brothers was like, "No, you can't have it. It's ours. We want it. We're going to make this." And it completely, really did kick off the whole giant creature, giant ant, giant.
Yeah, it really did.
Movies.
Yeah, and I think it's truly a really, really fun movie. And. Yeah, I really think it stands up. Of course, Warner are talking about the inevitable disastrous remake, which we'll
discuss the other week
at some point. I think that's how we got onto this, wasn't it?
It was how we got on because they announced they were going to do a remake stroke reboot. So
yeah,
I mean, it could be good. We don't know.
Who knows? It could well be good. Warner just don't have much of a track record these days, but we can live in hope.
Yeah.
But so that was them. Highly recommended from both of us. And I'm pretty sure it's available everywhere if you look around.
Yeah.
But yes, we'll be back next week with our usual reviews. But until then, stay safe, take care, and thanks for tuning in.